Welcome to the Jazz Notes Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Anderson. We are recording this on September 3rd. 1 month from today, the Utah Jazz will be into training camp one day before their first preseason game. So the NBA season is very rapidly approaching. I would imagine we'd get some more Jazz news coming up over the next month, but really not a whole lot going on since they signed Patty Mills a few weeks ago. Thanks as always for listening. You can find us on Twitter at Ben's Hoops, at C Holt Sports. That's for our co-host Chandler, who is out today. And always read us at KSLSports.com. You can find us on social media at KSL Sports on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Threads, wherever you like to post or read your news. On social media, you can find us at KSL Sports. As I mentioned, just not a lot of Jazz news going on. We'll see if they add some more training camp additions in the next month as they get ready to gear up on October 1st. Media Day is actually coming up this month. That will be September 30th across the league. That's when everyone's doing it, so I'd expect the Jazz to do that as well. A couple of teams who are starting their preseasons overseas and playing some overseas games as part of the NBA International Tour that they do. We'll start, I think, on the 26th. So we'll start getting a lot more NBA news, but I expect it to be pretty dry for a couple of weeks. So as always, appreciate you tuning in, even though it is a full-blown college football season, not necessarily NBA season yet. But I do like to answer your Jazz questions, so we are doing another full mailbag episode. Like I said, follow me on Twitter at Ben's Hoops. You can reply to my prompt every Tuesday. I send it out at about 11 o'clock. I record this at noon, so you've got an hour to get your questions in. And as always, you can DM me ahead of time on Twitter at Ben's Hoops, and I will try and remember to answer it when we get to the podcast. So let's just get started. Jazz Time Jones on Twitter. Much love, gentlemen. How is the Jazz coaching staff below Will Hardy viewed across the league, developmental and strategy-wise? We lost a lot of coaches with Quinn leaving and not many familiar names remaining. That was certainly one of Quinn Snyder's biggest strengths. He had really good coaching staffs and found ways. I think he recognized talent really well. I think that's a nod to Quinn, and because he had bounced around as much as he had, he'd been an assistant in as many places as he had, and I think that was smart of how Quinn had built his career, really, and some of it obviously was after what had happened at Missouri and needing to bounce around and I guess rebuild his identity a little bit, which he started with the Austin Toros, but had success in Philly and Atlanta and with the Lakers and had coached a lot of places. I think he did a good job recognizing what makes a good assistant coach and what he would want when he got back to being the lead guy. And he certainly was able to do that well in Utah, and you can see the names that he kept. Guys like Alex Jensen that stuck around when he got hired from the Ty Corbin staff, and some guys who he brought in on his own. There was a long list of coaches that he'd either worked with overseas or in the U.S. That ended up getting jobs elsewhere based on what they were able to do in Utah. That was a strength of Quinn, and I don't know if we've seen that replicated yet with Will Hardy. Now, the goals have been different. Quinn took a job with the Jazz with a team that had just drafted Dante Exum, number 5 overall. They had exited the low point of their rebuild and were starting to try to win games. And, that last 41 games of Quinn Snyder's first year in Utah, he started to flex his muscle as a coach and put Dante in the starting lineup and started Rudy. And the Jazz took off and finished whatever it was right at 500, just below 500. And then by year 2, we're really kind of gaining again, just missed the playoffs again. And I think he made it in his 3rd year. But Quinn was really strong as a head coach and I think had a really good feel for what he wanted from an assistant coach. I don't know if I've seen that yet from this current Jazz coaching staff, and that's not to say that Will Hardy doesn't know what he's looking for, but because the Jazz have still been in deconstruction mode, I'm not sure the quality of assistant coach yet, and then he's lost some guys. Lamar Skeeter has left, Johnny Bryant left, Alex Jensen, who I mentioned, has left. So there have been some experienced names in Utah that have left for other jobs, and generally they were bigger jobs. They weren't jobs that were, lesser or parallel moves. I'm sure, there have been some guys who Will necessarily didn't want back on his roster. I don't know if those 3, that would apply to any of them, to be fair. But I know some guys have chosen to take other opportunities elsewhere in the league as opposed to remaining in Utah. Then again, he's had Jason Terry here, and Jason Terry was interviewing for head coaching jobs and came to Utah and seems to like being in Salt Lake City and is probably, I guess, maybe the prize name on this Jazz coaching staff right now that could probably work anywhere. Scott Morrison is pretty highly regarded as well, had done a good job in Australia, or maybe he's in New Zealand, but has been a good G League coach, was an assistant with the Boston Celtics as well. He's pretty widely respected, kind of an offensive guru. So I think Scott Morrison's a good offensive coach. And then it's a lot of young guys like Sean Sheldon, who's Lowry's coach, trying to prove, that they can make that step up. He's moving to the front of the bench this year, just meaning he's literally moving off the second row to that front row. So you'll see him more in a suit, and probably not in a suit. I guess nobody wears suits anymore, but you'll see his face more around Will Hardy when they're making decisions. But I think Scott Morrison's certainly that lead guy for the Jazz with Jason Terry. Probably right there as number 2 or number 3. So that is an aspect I'm curious for the Jazz and something I've kind of been tracking. When you go as young as the Jazz have, and you have 7 players on the roster that are third-year players or younger, and that doesn't even count Johnny Juzang, but we're talking about draft picks, Walker Kessler, Bryce Sensabaugh, Taylor Hendricks, Keontae George, Cody Williams, Isaiah Collier, Kyle Filipowski. You've got to develop those guys, and you have to have coaches who are really good at developing those guys. And going back to the Quinn Snyder aspect of this, he had a good coaching staff for developing players. The Jazz did a really good job developing players for the most part. Obviously not everybody, but I thought there was a real delineation in Rudy Gobert's career when Quinn got hired, recognizing what you have there and how to utilize him to get the most out of him that Tyrone Corbin wasn't doing. And, Gordon Hayward continued to get a lot better under Quinn Snyder. Donovan Mitchell got better. He didn't just stay the same player he was as a rookie, which would have been a good player. He was averaging 20 points a game. He was pretty dynamic with the ball in his hands. He kept adding things, getting better. I don't know if Mike Conley, quote unquote, got better, but even at 30 years old, he found ways to round out his game, was put in spots to be successful where he makes an all-star team. Joe Ingles, obviously a great success story. George Niang, a great success story. Royce O'Neal, a great success story. While I think you have to give those players a lot of credit for being good themselves, I think the Jazz coaching staff, recognizing what they do well, how to use them, certainly played a part in that. And I don't know if we've seen that yet from Will Hardy. Now, I think if you're the Jazz right now, you could argue, well, look, Kelly Olynyk came in, played well, you turned him into a first-round draft pick. Okay, that's a success. Simone Fontecchio came in, played well. You turned him into a borderline first-round draft pick that turned into Kyle Filipowski. That's a win for the Jazz. There have been guys like Ochai Agbaji who didn't develop, who didn't get any better. There have been guys like Walker who I think had a great first year, doing a lot of the same things he did in college and didn't get better last year. And there's questions about what direction they're going to be heading. So it's too small of a sample size, I would say. And you know what? I would have said the same thing for Quinn Snyder going into his third season. We just don't know yet. Because truthfully, Dante Exum didn't get that much better. And some of that was injury related, but he never really figured out how to get better in Utah. Jordan Clarkson, who they traded Dante Exum for, did get better once he got to the Jazz. Can Will Hardy continue to do that? Does Taylor Hendricks take a jump in year 2, or is he not getting any better? Does Bryce Sensabaugh get better in year 2? Does Keontae get better in year 2? You can point to Lauri Markkanen and say that was a success story. He's gotten better since he's been in Utah. The Jazz recognize how to play him, how to use him, and he continues to utilize that well. But is he going to become a true, legit number 1 guy? The Jazz have tried to put him at the nail, put him in some different spots on the floor to see how he develops, and use him that way. Is that going to work? Those are big storylines worth tracking. So I think that's why this is a worthwhile question from Jazz Time Jones. The Jazz are investing a lot in their young players. Can they get better? Colin Sexton, I think, got better last year. So there's definitely some pluses of some veteran guys or some older guys who have gotten better. Lowry, Colin Sexton, who the Jazz are utilizing really well. Is that just because every team takes 100 shots a game and those guys are getting more shots than they were getting in their previous stops? Or are they actually getting better? And then how do the young guys play? That's something worth watching, and that comes down to Will Hardy and his assistant coaching staff. And right now, unfortunately, I'm going to sit on the fence and give you a bit of a non-answer and say it's a bit of an unknown at this point. That's something that they still have to prove out, that they can develop players and that this coaching staff can stick around. And I think Will Hardy's still trying to figure out exactly what that coaching staff's going to look like, and they do change pretty rapidly and regularly, so I think that's still a work in progress for the Jazz. So I'll give him a passing grade. I don't think it's been a failure. Certainly Will Hardy has not been a failure by any means. I think Will Hardy's done a good job with the Jazz, but we'll see what this year looks like. It could be not critical for his job, but we'll get a much clearer identity of players getting better now that he's had a lot of guys under his wing for at least a season and 3 more young players coming in. All right, speaking of young players, that leads us into our next question from J. Brandon Olson. Can Cody Williams become better than his brother? He can. we don't know how good his brother's going to be yet. I think it's so easy to forget that Jalen Williams, Cody's brother, is only in his second year. He just wrapped up his second year, and he's already turned into a, top 25 player in the NBA, borderline top 25. I think he's going to be a perennial all-star. I think he's going to be really good. Last season, 19 points, 4.5 assists, 4 rebounds, 54% from the floor, 42% from three, 81% from the free throw line. It's crazy how good he was in year 2. It was really good in year 1, too. 14 points, 4.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists. He got better as a playmaker in year 2, over a steal a game. He's just really awesome. And going into his third season at 23 years old, the sky is the limit for him. I kind of think when we talk about the Olympic team 4 years from now and who's going to play, Jaylen Brown's going to be there, Jason Tatum's going to be there. I think Jalen Williams has a chance to be one of the stars of that team. When you look at the history of the types of players that have had success, we saw how good Kevin Durant was this year. Carmelo Anthony's been very good as an international player. I could see Jalen Williams being that type of guy going forward as a offensive dynamo who can do some playmaking and can shoot all over the floor and has the type of build that really translates well to international basketball. I think Jalen Williams is going to be a face of Team USA going forward. That's just a very early prediction. But, does Cody get there? Cody is taller. He's much thinner. He's got to put on about 20 pounds to match his brother's weight at least. And I don't know if he's going to get there, but height is a huge plus in the NBA, so being a little bit bigger helps him. I guess what is surprising is that some of their strengths are similar. Really efficient shooters. We know Cody did that at a really high level at Colorado. There were questions on such a low quantity if that was going to translate to the NBA. And I thought in the Summer League it looked really good. It didn't look good in Salt Lake, but in Vegas it looked good. Again, we're talking about a total of like 7 games, so we don't know yet. But his efficiency shooting the ball has been good wherever he's gone. That certainly applied to Jalen as well. Better playmaker probably than rebounder. One of the big knocks on Cody Williams has been that he's not a very good rebounder despite his size. That might become with how slight he is. But Jalen's only getting 4 a game. Actually went down from year 1 to year 2. And again, that's some of how they used him. And it'll probably go down even more now with some of the additions that Oklahoma City made in their second season because he's already playing 31 minutes a game. I don't see him playing a whole lot more. But his assists are up. I thought there was some playmaking from Cody Williams that looked good in the Summer League as well. And that would certainly be helpful for the Jazz where they could use a guy who can get out there and create for others. And then the steals per game, we'll see if Cody's able to be that type of an impact player defensively, but he's got the physical tools to do it, certainly, to be a good defender. So there are some similarities to their game. I try to resist comparing them too often because, A, it's such a lofty bar for Cody Williams. His brother's just going to be one of the best players in the league. His brother is probably going to be a perennial top 20 guy, could be a Jaylen Brown type in his prime, and Jaylen Brown just won the Finals MVP, and I would not take that out of Jalen Williams' future. I think he's got that type of potential. Does Cody Williams ever get there? Some of that has to do with the team around him, and then let's see how he plays. He's never played an NBA game. I'm excited for the preseason to see those types of things. How does Cody look playing next to Lauri Markkanen, Colin Sexton, John Collins, Walker Kessler? Does that make him better? Does that make him worse? There were times at Colorado where he, shied away when he was playing next to KJ Simpson and liked to defer to those guys. I thought in Vegas when the Jazz just kind of said, hey, man, this is your team. You got to go be the guy. He really stepped up to the plate and had some moments where he just thought, okay, this kid could be really awesome. And that's the potential if he has the mindset, the physicality improves, the height, the shooting stroke, the slitheriness that he has getting to the rim. Could really translate. Difficult shot maker, talented finishing at the rim, like crazy talented finishing at the rim, not just as a dunker, but really great touch. That's how you become an all-star. So the potential is certainly there. It's why he was a top 10 pick. Better than his brother? My bet would be no. He never gets there, but I certainly don't want to rule it out. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll wrap up the mailbag. On the other side, stick around. More Jazz Notes coming up next. Welcome back to the Jazz Notes podcast. We will wrap this up. Appreciate everybody tuning in as always. Remember, you can find me on Twitter at Ben's Hoops to send in your mailbag questions. Chandler Holt will be back with us next week, as we'll be 3 weeks out from the start of training camp for the Jazz and get you a fuller breakdown as we prepare for the season. Todd Crow on Twitter says, how do you think Walker and, more importantly, Lowry took the trade rumors? He had to be checking Twitter like the rest of us on the regular too, right? Why put him through that if at best you get Poke, Kuminga, and a few late first-round picks, maybe a good one in 2029, meaning Pokashevsky. Again, I don't think the Jazz were leaking a lot of these rumors. Now, maybe a little bit of them they were kind of letting it be known that teams were bidding on Lowry, and if you wanted him, it was going to take a monumental package to pry him away. I kind of don't think it ever got all that close with Golden State. Certainly seems like maybe if they were willing to include everybody, Pokusevski, Kuminga, Moody, all their future picks, the Jazz certainly would have had to listen. I know there were reports that Sacramento felt like they got close on a deal. I'm still kind of curious what that would have actually looked like. I bet it didn't get as close as some people are trying to lay out, because I'm guessing Sacramento didn't want to include all of their young prospects, which the Jazz were going to want. But, why put them through that? Some of that's just a little bit out of your control. Lowry was the, by far, best target this offseason, unless you want to say it was Paul George, which I'd listen to. Certainly Paul George right now is a better player than Lauri Markkanen, but at 26, 27 years old, team control for now 5 years for the Jazz, which another team would have gotten as well had they traded for him and signed him and extended him. It's a hell of a place to be. It's a hell of an advantageous spot. And because Lowry's still only signing for just over $200 million with the salary cap going up in the next few years, he's going to be one of the, best price players in the NBA. Not cheap by any means, but certainly appropriately paid for a guy who can fill that role as a top 2 or top 3 player on your team. So you're happy to have him. How do I think they react? Less concerned about Lauri Markkanen, whose whole life has been on the trade rumor. He got traded on draft night. Chicago played him for a year. He got hurt. Goes to year 2. They didn't want to extend him, so they sign and trade him right to Cleveland, or he gets traded and signs his deal there. They're playing him out of position, kind of. At least it feels like they were playing out of position. He's fully a 3, but he's 7 feet tall, playing next to 2 other 7-footers. It was just kind of clunky. He wasn't getting the ball a whole lot. It seemed obvious that he was going to be involved in trade rumors, was sent to the Jazz, and now has flourished. I don't think that actually bothers him all that much. Now, he's human, and he's got all these other things he's got to pay attention to, but he's kind of already a fish out of water. He's playing in the United States. He's from Finland, played at Arizona for a year, a little under-recruited, but was a big name, certainly. I don't think this is all that strange of a spot for Lowry to be in. I would worry far more for Walker Kessler, because here's the problem. The trade rumors aren't going away for Walker Kessler. I expect Walker's name to be thrown around quite a bit as long as he's still on the opening night roster for the Jazz. Because, let's say the New York Knicks decide, we just still need to add another big guy who can block shots and rebound, because they have a really small lineup after losing Isaiah Hartenstein to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Okay, well, there's not many good players out there that can be had that cost basically nothing that can be impact players. And Walker is a guy who doesn't cost a whole lot. I mean, actually, financially, he fits within your bills, even if you're a luxury tax team and you can acquire him, or you're under the luxury tax or under the salary cap apron, and you can still acquire him for a reasonable dollar amount and only give up a first-round draft pick or a future draft pick for, Walker's going to be the name. Maybe New Orleans needs a center. There's teams out there that are going to want to add a guy that they feel like is damaged goods in Utah, that the Jazz are maybe selling low on after a really good rookie season, making the all-rookie team, and they think they're going to swindle the Jazz or get a good discount on a guy that they wouldn't be able to get otherwise. I don't know how the Jazz feel about that, but clearly they've been willing to shop Walker, and I think that could bother him more, especially based on where he kind of thought he was going to be as a piece of the Jazz's future after his rookie season, how poorly his second season went, and then how this offseason has gone since. And I still don't expect him to start. Maybe I'm totally off, but I still think John Collins is going to be the Jazz starting 5 with Lowry at the 4 or Taylor Hendricks at the 4 and Lowry at the 3. Those can be interchangeable. So maybe that continues to wear on Walker, and I will track that for sure, and he will be asked about it in the preseason, and we will write about it. But I could see that rattling him enough and keeping him off base enough that he never fully gets on track, and that would be a concern for me. And if you are concerned about that and you're the Jazz, maybe you just try and move him before the season starts and clear that space, and you move on with Kyle Filipowski or Drew Eubanks or whoever you want to play at center, and you just go with it that way. I think that is selling low on Walker. I'm not out on Walker by any means. I think he can still be a very good player. You look at all the B-ball index and what they do. Walker is still one of the most elite rim protectors in the NBA, and that has a lot of value. The question is, can you win with those types of guys in the playoffs that don't shoot threes, that don't spread the floor? The Jazz certainly seem to like the floor spacing aspect, which I wrote about it in last week's mailbag. I really think Kyle Filipowski is going to get a chance to play because of what he does as a floor spacer and as an offensive weapon, where the NBA is trending, and what Walker does not yet do I think that could be helpful for Flip. I'm not sure the Jazz are ever going to fully buy into Walker being that pure rim runner, especially because he's not the Derek Lively type of defender who's a rim runner but really switches all over the floor, can guard most guys on the court. It's not what Walker does. So we'll see how much the Jazz are willing to invest in him as their future center if they feel like there are certain limitations that don't get you over the hump when it really matters, when you are back to making the playoffs, etc. So good question. That's something I'm going to be watching for, certainly. I don't think it will bother Lowry. I do think it could bother Walker. But Walker's younger and hasn't been through this a whole lot in his life. You know, he did get traded again, somewhat similar, not on draft night, but did get traded before he played his first game in Minnesota. We'll see how he handles it going into his third season. We'll be back again next Tuesday. As always, send in your questions on Tuesday at 11 o'clock. I send out the prompt on Twitter at Ben's Hoops. If you want to DM me early, you always can. My DMs are open, so if you have a Jazz question, I'll either respond to you on the spot or I'm happy to do it on the podcast as well. Find us at KSL Sports. Read us at KSLSports.com. We'll be back with you again next week.